Hey guys, welcome back to One Stop Biology. So in today's video, we are going to cover parts of a flower and then placentation. So till now, we have covered almost four topics of the chapter 5 of NCERT Class 11. So we have covered root, stem, leaves, and flower. And we have covered all half of the flower, and today we are going to cover the rest of the topic. So let's start with parts of a flower. So basically, each flower has four floral whorls. Okay, so these four floral whorls are nothing but, so these are Androecium, Gynoecium, Corolla, Calyx. Okay, and all these are attached to a pedicel. So we are going to cover the four floral whorls, which is calyx, corolla, androecium, and gynoecium. Okay, so let's start with the first whorl, which is calyx. Now, calyx basically is the outermost whorl of the flower, and the members of calyx are known as sepals. Okay, now sepals basically are nothing but leaf-like. Okay, so they are basically leaf-like. They are green and they protect the flower in the bud stage. So these basically are closed, kind of closed. So when the flower has not bloomed and it is just in a bud stage, these basically enclose the bud in something like this. Okay, now the calyx can be united with the sepals or it can be free from the sepals. Okay, so if it is united with the sepals, it is known as gamosepalous, and if it is free from the sepals, it is known as polysepalous. Okay, now the next topic, the next whorl is corolla. So corolla is basically composed of what? Petals. Okay, so they are usually bright colored. So all the colors of in the flower that you see are nothing but corolla. So these are usually bright colored. And why is it bright in color? It is because it wants to attract insects for pollination, right? So it is brightly colored to attract insects for pollination. Now, corolla may be again united or free. So if the petals are united, as it is known as gamopetalous, and if it is free, it is known as polypetalous. Okay. Now the next thing that we have to see is that the shape of and color of corolla vary greatly in plants, right? So it varies a lot and it may be of different shapes as well, right? So it can be tubular, it can be bell-shaped, funnel-shaped, wheel-shaped, rounded, right? So here you can see are different petals of the corolla. Okay, so now the next thing is there's a topic that there are different mode of arrangement of sepals and petals in the floral bud. Now this is with respect to the number and the same whorl. So what is the other numbers of the same whorl? And this is known as estivation. So estivation is basically mode of arrangement of sepals or petals in the floral bud with respect to other members of the same whorl. Okay, so it can be of four types, guys, right? So it can be valvate, it can be twisted, it can be imbricate, and it can be vexillary. Okay, so it can be of four different types. Now the first, which is valvate, so in that what happens that when sepals or petals in a whorl, okay, so when sepals or petals in a whorl just touch one another at the margin. So it just touches one another at the margin without any kind of overlapping. It is known as valvate. An example is calotropis. So here if you see the diagram, here if you see that the sepals or petals are just touching each other and they are not overlapping. So this is valvate. Now in twisted what happens? If one margin of the appendage overlaps the next one, right? So this happens in case of China rose, lady's finger, or cotton. So here if you see, one margin is overlapping the other one, right? So this is twisted. The other one is if the margin of sepals or petals overlap one another, but not in any particular direction. So it's not overlapping in any particular direction. Okay, then this is imbricate. So here if you see, there's a direction that every time this end is inside, right? So there's a direction. Here if you see, there's no direction. Sometimes this side is out and this is sometimes the same side of the different sepal or petal, it's inside. So if there is no direction, the overlap is in not any particular direction, it is imbricate. And the examples are cassia and gulmohar. Okay. Now the last one is vexillary. So in vexillary, what happens is there are 5 petals. Okay. Now in that, the largest petal overlaps the two lateral petals, which are known as wings, and that in turn overlaps the two smallest anterior petal. Okay, so this is the largest one. It is overlapping the two adjacent ones, and then these are overlapping the two smallest anterior petals. So this kind of estivation is known as vexillary or papilionaceous. Okay, so this happens in pea flowers or beans flower. Okay, so these are 4 kind of arrangement of sepals or petals in a floral bud, and it is with respect to other members of the same whorl. Okay, so the different sepals or petals, how they are arranged. Okay, now the next one is androecium. So androecium basically is composed of stamen, right? And each stamen represents the male reproductive organ, which consists of a stalk, that is, and a filament and anther. Okay, now anther usually is bilobed, and each lobe has 2 chambers. So each lobe has 2 pollen sacs. Okay. Now the pollen grains are produced in these pollen sacs, right? Now there are sometimes sterile stamen as well, which are known as staminode. Okay, wherein you will not find any pollen grain, right? So the stamens of a flower may be united with other members such as petals and sepals. So when stamen are attached to the petals, it is known as epipetalous, and it happens in brinjal. And when stamen is attached to the perianth, then it is known as epiphyllous. Okay, so as in the flower of lily, right? Now, in some cases, stamens in a flower may either remain free, so stamens might be free, which is polyandrous, or it may be united to a certain degree, right? So it might be united to a certain degree as well. Now, if the stamen are united into one bunch or one bundle, it is known as monoadelphous. And the example is China rose. So, you'll have to remember what these terms exactly mean. So, if it is united into one bunch or one bundle, it is known as monoadelphous, and it happens in China rose. And if it is united into two bundles, it is diadelphous, that happens in pea. Now, sometimes it can be united into more than two bundles, and that is polyadelphous, and that happens in citrus fruits, right? So, there may be a variation of length of filament as well. Like within a flower, there might be different stamen wherein the length of filament might be different, and that happens in salvia and mustard plant. So here if you see, this is the diagram of a stamen. Here is the stalk or filament, and this is the anther which has the pollen grain. So the last word that we have to cover is gynoecium. Gynoecium is nothing but the female reproductive part of the flower, and it is made of one or more carpel. Now, carpel has 3 parts, which is stigma, style, and ovary. So, remember that it has 3 parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Now, ovary basically is the you know, uh, basal part, which is enlarged or swollen basal part, on which we have the tube, which is the style. And stigma is the tip of the style, and that is the receptive surface for pollen grain, right? So now each ovary bears one or more ovules which are attached to a flattened cushion-like placenta, right? So when one more than one carpel is present, then it may be free, which is apocarpus, which happens in rose and lotus. And if the carpels are fused, they are known as syncarpus, which is the case in mustard and tomato. Okay. Now, after fertilization, these ovules develop into seed and the ovary matures into a fruit. So if you see here, this is the diagram of a gynoecium. Now here the tip is the stigma, then there's an elongated style, and the bulged part is nothing but the ovary which has the ovule, right? Now what happens after this? So basically there is placentation as well. What exactly this placentation is? So arrangement of ovules within the ovary is placentation, right? So again, the arrangement of ovules within the ovary is known as placentation. Now, this placentation can be of different types. It can be marginal, it can be axile, it can be parietal, it can be basal, central, and free central. So, what happens in marginal placentation? In marginal placentation, the placenta forms a ridge along the ventral suture of the ovary, and ovules are born on those ridges, forming two rooms. So this happens in P. So see the diagram. So here what is happening is that the placenta forms a ridge, okay, along the ventral suture of the ovary, and ovules are born on this ridge, forming two rooms. This happens in P. Okay, so this is marginal placentation. Now the next one is axile presentation. So in axile presentation, ovules are attached to what? So when the basically placenta is axial, right? So when the placenta is axial and ovules are attached to it in a multilocular ovary. Okay, so basically what is happening here is the placenta is axial. Okay, and the ovules are attached to it in a multilocular ovary. Then the placental is known as axile, and this is the case in China rose or tomato and lemon. Okay, so this basically is the axile placentation. Now the next one is parietal placentation. So in parietal placentation, the ovule develops on the inner wall of the ovary. Okay, so you see this one now, right? So here it was just opposite. The ovule is inside, right? In parietal, it is here, right? So basically, what is happening? The ovules develop on the inner wall of the ovary or the peripheral part, right? Now, ovary is one chambered because it becomes two chambered due to, but it becomes two chambered due to formation of a false septum. Okay, so remember that as well. That usually the ovary is one chambered, but it becomes two chambered due to formation of a false septum, and this happens in the mustard plant, right? Now the next one is free central placentation. So here the ovules are born on central axis. Here you can see that the ovules are born on central axis, and there's no septa, there's no division. Septa are absent. This happens in dianthus and primrose. So the presentation can be free central as well. And then we have the basal placentation. So in the case of basal placentation, the placenta develops at the base of the ovary, right? So here if you see, the placenta develops at the base of the ovary and single ovule is attached to it. So this happens in sunflower and marigold. And what happens? So the placenta develops at the base of the ovary and single ovule is attached to it as in sunflower and marigold. So this is all about parts of a flower and then what exactly placentation is. So guys, with this we have covered the entire topic of flower as well, and in the next video we are going to start with fruit and seed. So I hope you understood what are the parts of the plant exactly, how does it exactly look, and what do we call it differently if it is differently formed in the flower, right? So depending upon whether it is attached together, whether it is not, whether its position with respect to other whorls, the same whorl, there are different names. So remember that you should know all these terminologies, right, of flower as well as placentation. If you have any doubt regarding this video, please drop in a message on the WhatsApp number that I have given, or you can just mention in the comment below on the respective video and I'll clear your doubts. If you understood it well, do not forget to like the video and share it with your friends, please. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye bye.